You're too expensive, CFO Richard Sterling declared, sliding a termination letter across his mahogany desk. After 8 years protecting the nation's most sensitive defense data, I was being replaced by a cheaper outsourced team from overseas. I nodded, calmly gathered my security badges, and walked out of Apex Defense Solutions for the last time. The next morning, General Patricia Hayes from the Department of Defense arrived for her quarterly security audit. She took one look at the foreign contractors accessing classified systems, and her face turned stone cold. Who are these civilians touching my data? Shut it down immediately. My name is Gloria, and at 34 years old, I thought I understood corporate America's priorities. I was wrong about how far executives would go to chase profits even when those decisions threatened national security. 8 years ago, I transitioned from active duty Air Force cybersecurity specialist to civilian defense contractor, bringing my top secret clearance with sensitive compartmented information access to Apex Defense Solutions. The company specialized in secure data management for the Department of Defense NSA and other classified government agencies, generating $200 million annually, with 80% coming from federal contracts. My role as senior security architect meant designing and maintaining security protocols for Project Guardian, a classified NSA data analysis system that processed signals intelligence from global sources. I was the only person at Apex with complete technical knowledge of the system, a responsibility I'd earned through years of dedicated service and continuous security education. Apex had been my professional home, a place where I could use my military training to protect America's interests while building a civilian career. The work was challenging and meaningful. Every algorithm I wrote, every security protocol I implemented, every vulnerability I identified potentially saved American lives overseas. But everything changed 6 months ago when InvestCorp Holdings, our parent company, hired Richard Sterling as Chief Financial Officer. Sterling came from Wall Street investment banking with zero defense industry experience, focused solely on maximizing profit margins without understanding the unique requirements of classified government work. Sterling was a typical corporate cost cutter, the kind of executive who saw employees as line items on spreadsheets rather than skilled professionals with irreplaceable expertise. At 48 years old, he carried himself with the arrogant confidence of someone who believed financial engineering could solve any problem, including ones he didn't understand. The pressure came from InvestCorp Holdings, which demanded 20% cost reduction across all subsidiaries to improve quarterly earnings reports for Wall Street analysts. Sterling identified personnel costs as his primary target, viewing our highly paid security professionals as inefficient overhead rather than essential guardians of national secrets. We're paying premium salaries for routine IT work, Sterling had announced during his first all-hands meeting. The market offers equivalent services at fraction of our current costs. It's time to modernize our approach to human resources. I'd raised my hand immediately. Sir, defense contracting isn't routine IT work. We're handling classified information that requires security clearances, background investigations, and specialized training. These aren't transferable skills. Sterling had dismissed my concerns with a condescending smile. Gloria, I appreciate your loyalty to current processes, but business evolution requires embracing more efficient alternatives. Trust me, I've optimized costs for Fortune 500 companies. Defense contracting isn't fundamentally different. His ignorance was breathtaking. Defense contracting operated under layers of federal regulations, security requirements, and oversight mechanisms that commercial businesses never encountered. International traffic in arms regulations alone created legal frameworks that could send executives to federal prison for seemingly minor violations. Over the following months, I'd watched Sterling systematically dismantle Apex's security culture. He eliminated mandatory security training sessions as unnecessary expenses, reduced background investigation requirements for new hires, and pressured our clearance holders to work longer hours for the same compensation. The breaking point came when Sterling contracted with Dataflow Solutions, an Indian outsourcing company offering the same services for 60% lower costs. The company promised a team of 12 developers and system administrators based in Bangalore who could maintain Project Guardian security protocols remotely. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking InvestCorp expects, Sterling had bragged during the executive briefing where he announced my termination. We're reducing personnel costs by $800,000 annually while maintaining full operational capability. I tried one final time to explain the legal and security implications of his decision. Richard, these foreign contractors can't obtain the security clearances required for accessing classified systems. Federal law explicitly prohibits non-citizens from handling top-secret information. You're creating violations that could result in criminal charges. Sterling had waved away my concerns like annoying insects. That's protectionist fear-mongering Gloria. The modern economy is global and successful companies leverage international talent. We'll handle the compliance paperwork through standard administrative channels. There was no standard administrative channels for granting foreign nationals access to America's most sensitive intelligence systems. Sterling's plan violated so many federal laws that I'd lost count while reading through the relevant statutes. But Sterling was convinced that his Wall Street expertise trumped my 8 years of defense industry experience. He'd already committed to the Data Flow Solutions contract, already promised InvestCorp Holdings, the cost savings already planned his performance bonus based on achieving the personnel reductions. The termination meeting was a masterclass in corporate manipulation. Sterling praised my valuable contributions while explaining that strategic restructuring required realigning our human resources with evolving market demands. He offered a generous severance package contingent on signing non-disclosure and non-compete agreements designed to prevent me from exposing his violations to competitors or government authorities. Gloria, you're a talented professional who deserves opportunities to grow beyond Apex's current limitations, Sterling had said with practiced sincerity. This transition opens doors for both of us to pursue more suitable arrangements. I'd signed the papers because fighting would have been futile. Sterling controlled the company, had support from InvestCorp Holdings, and possessed the corporate authority to implement his disastrous cost-cutting regardless of my objections. Sometimes, the smart move is tactical retreat while planning counterattacks from better positions. As I cleared out my desk that afternoon, gathering 8 years of technical manuals, security certifications, and personal mementos, I discovered something that made my blood freeze. Sterling had already granted the Data Flow Solutions team administrative access to Project Guardian's classified systems without proper security clearances or background investigations. Foreign nationals were accessing top-secret intelligence data in direct violation of federal law, and Sterling either didn't understand the implications or didn't care about the consequences. He'd created a national security crisis through sheer ignorance and corporate greed, walking out of Apex Defense Solutions for the final time carrying a box of belongings that represented my entire career. I knew Sterling's cost-cutting victory was temporary. Tomorrow morning, General Patricia Hayes would arrive for her quarterly security audit, and Sterling was about to discover that some mistakes have consequences more severe than bad quarterly earnings reports. The man who'd fired me to save money was about to learn that national security isn't negotiable and that ignorance of federal law isn't a valid defense when American lives hang in the balance. General Patricia Hayes represented everything Richard Sterling wasn't competent, experienced, and absolutely committed to protecting American national security interests. As a 3-star general and director of the Defense Information Systems Agency, she carried responsibility for cybersecurity across all Department of Defense networks, a role that had shaped her into one of the military's most respected technology leaders. At 51 years old, General Hayes had spent 25 years building her reputation on zero-tolerance approaches to security violations. She'd risen through the ranks by catching problems before they became disasters, identifying vulnerabilities before enemies could exploit them, and holding contractors accountable when they failed to meet federal standards. Her quarterly security audit at Apex Defense Solutions had been scheduled months in advance, a routine compliance inspection that Sterling had completely forgotten about due to his inexperience with defense contracting protocols. While he'd been focused on cost reductions and profit margins, General Hayes had been planning comprehensive reviews of every system, every access point, and every person with classified data privileges. The general arrived at 8:30 on Tuesday morning with her security team, a group of technical specialists trained to identify violations that could compromise national security. They carried specialized equipment for testing network vulnerabilities, scanning for unauthorized access points, and verifying compliance with federal security standards. Sterling greeted them in Apex's reception area, wearing his most confident smile and preparing to demonstrate how his cost-cutting measures had improved company efficiency. He had no idea he was about to meet someone whose expertise in cybersecurity exceeded his understanding by several decades. General Hayes, welcome to Apex Defense Solutions. Sterling began with practiced corporate charm. I'm Richard Sterling, Chief Financial Officer. We're excited to showcase our recent operational improvements and enhanced cost effectiveness. General Hayes barely acknowledged Sterling's introduction. Her attention immediately focused on the data flow solutions contractors visible through the glass-walled conference room. 12 foreign nationals sat at workstations displaying classified Project Guardian interfaces, their lack of security badges immediately apparent to her trained eye. Mr. Sterling, General Hayes said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Who are those individuals accessing classified systems, and where are their security clearance verifications? Sterling's confidence wavered slightly as he realized the general's question wasn't part of routine small talk. Those are our new technical support specialists from Data Flow Solutions. They're providing enhanced system maintenance services as part of our modernization initiative. I didn't ask about their job functions, General Hayes replied with growing intensity. I asked about their security clearances. Project Guardian contains top-secret sensitive compartmented information that requires specific federal authorization for access. Sterling attempted to maintain his executive composure while his fundamental ignorance of defense contracting became increasingly obvious. General, these contractors have temporary emergency access while their permanent clearances are being processed through standard administrative channels. The silence that followed was heavy with General Hayes' professional outrage. In her 25-year career, she'd never heard anything so profoundly ignorant of basic security requirements. There were no temporary emergency access provisions for foreign nationals, no standard administrative channels for circumventing background investigations, and no legitimate reason for Sterling's blatant violations of federal law. Mr. Sterling, there are no emergency provisions for granting foreign nationals access to classified intelligence systems, General Hayes stated with the precision of someone delivering a death sentence. You appear to be in violation of international traffic in arms regulations, the Espionage Act, and multiple Defense Department security directives. Sterling's face drained of color as the implications of the general's words penetrated his consciousness. He'd expected routine bureaucratic formalities, not accusations of federal crimes that could result in decades of imprisonment. General, I think there may be some misunderstanding about our compliance procedures, Sterling stammered, his Wall Street confidence completely evaporating. Data Flow Solutions is a reputable international contractor with extensive experience in secure data management. General Hayes turned to her security team with the kind of look that preceded career-ending investigations. Immediate shutdown of all classified systems. Confiscate all equipment currently accessed by unauthorized personnel. Initiate full Department of Defense Inspector General investigation. As her team moved with military precision to secure the compromised systems, General Hayes continued her devastating assessment of Sterling's violations. Mr. Sterling, Data Flow Solutions has been under FBI monitoring for potential espionage activities. Several of their employees have documented connections to foreign intelligence services. Sterling's world tilted sideways as he realized his cost-cutting decision had potentially handed American intelligence secrets to hostile foreign governments. The savings he'd celebrated with InvestCorp Holdings were about to become the most expensive mistake in Apex's corporate history. General, surely we can work through any compliance issues through proper channels. Sterling pleaded, his executive authority completely undermined by his obvious ignorance. I'm prepared to cooperate fully with any necessary adjustments to our procedures. General Hayes's response eliminated any possibility of covering up Sterling's violations through corporate damage control. Mr. Sterling, this isn't a compliance issue. This is a potential act of espionage. You've granted foreign nationals access to intelligence systems that protect ongoing military operations in hostile countries. The General Security Team worked methodically to assess the scope of Sterling's security breach, their grim expressions revealing the magnitude of potential damage. Project Guardian contained real-time intelligence from sources whose lives depended on protecting their identities and methods. Ma'am, called Technical Sergeant Rodriguez General Hayes's lead cybersecurity analyst, initial scans show evidence of data copying to external servers. Classified files appear to have been transmitted to systems in Mumbai over the past 72 hours. The revelation hit Sterling like a physical blow. His cost-cutting measures hadn't just violated federal law, they'd potentially compromised intelligence sources whose exposure could result in torture and execution by enemy governments. General Hayes turned back to Sterling with the cold fury of a professional warrior whose mission had been betrayed by corporate greed. Mr. Sterling, you will immediately contact your legal counsel and prepare for federal investigation. This facility is now under Department of Defense security control until we can assess the full extent of your violations. As military personnel began cordoning off areas of Apex's offices, Sterling realized his career was ending in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The man who'd fired me to save $800,000 had created a national security crisis that would cost millions to investigate and potentially endanger American lives worldwide. General Hayes's final words to Sterling contained the kind of professional judgment that ends careers and launches criminal prosecutions. Mr. Sterling, in 25 years of military service, I have never encountered such reckless disregard for national security. You will be held accountable for every consequence of your decisions. The cost-cutting champion, who dismissed my security concerns as protectionist fear-mongering, was about to discover that protecting America's secrets isn't optional and that some mistakes carry consequences more severe than poor quarterly earnings reports. Within 6 hours of General Hayes' security shutdown, Special Agent Diana Rodriguez from the FBI's National Security Division had transformed Apex Defense Solutions into the center of a federal counterintelligence investigation. Agent Rodriguez specialized in defense contractor espionage cases, bringing 15 years of experience hunting foreign spies who targeted American military secrets. At 39 years old, Agent Rodriguez had built her career by understanding that national security threats often originated from corporate negligence rather than sophisticated foreign operations. Companies like Apex created vulnerabilities that hostile intelligence services exploited through seemingly legitimate business relationships. The FBI's involvement elevated Sterling's cost-cutting blunder from administrative violation to potential criminal conspiracy. Agent Rodriguez arrived with a team of cybersecurity experts, financial analysts, and counterintelligence specialists trained to unravel complex cases where corporate greed enabled foreign espionage. Mr. Sterling, Agent Rodriguez began during their first interview, you're facing federal charges for espionage contract fraud and violating international traffic in arms regulations. Each charge carries potential prison sentences of 10 to 20 years. Sterling sat across from Agent Rodriguez in Apex's conference room, now converted into an FBI field office, with his expensive attorney James Harrison frantically taking notes. The corporate executive who'd confidently dismissed security concerns was struggling to comprehend the magnitude of his legal jeopardy. Agent Rodriguez, my client made administrative errors in implementing cost reduction strategies. Harrison interjected with typical lawyer deflection. Mr. Sterling had no intention of compromising national security and cooperated immediately when violations were identified. Agent Rodriguez's response revealed the sophisticated nature of the FBI's investigation. Mr. Harrison, our preliminary analysis suggests your client's actions were part of a systematic pattern of security violations affecting multiple defense contractors owned by InvestCorp Holdings. The revelation that Sterling's case connected to a larger counterintelligence investigation sent shockwaves through Apex's remaining leadership. What had appeared to be isolated cost-cutting decisions was actually part of a corporate strategy that had compromised classified programs across multiple companies. Agent Rodriguez contacted me yesterday. I explained to my former colleague Sarah Thompson during a coffee meeting near Apex's offices. They need my expertise to determine exactly what information was compromised and how it could be used against American interests. Sarah, a systems analyst who'd worked closely with me on Project Guardian, looked exhausted from the stress of the federal investigation. Gloria, it's chaos here. Half the employees are looking for new jobs. The other half are being interviewed by FBI agents. And Sterling is hiding in his office with lawyers. My cooperation with the FBI investigation provided crucial technical analysis that Agent Rodriguez needed to build her criminal case. As the only person who fully understood Project Guardian's architecture, I could identify exactly which intelligence sources had been exposed and which ongoing operations faced potential compromise. Gloria, your documentation of the system's vulnerabilities and access controls is exceptional, Agent Rodriguez observed as we reviewed classified materials in the FBI's secure facility. Sterling's decisions created exposure points that could endanger intelligence assets worldwide. The FBI's cybersecurity analysis revealed the sophisticated nature of Data Flow Solutions' data collection activities. Rather than simply maintaining Project Guardian systems, the Indian contractors had systematically copied classified files to servers in Mumbai, creating an intelligence treasure trove for potential foreign buyers. Data Flow Solutions has been under FBI surveillance for 18 months, Agent Rodriguez explained during our technical briefing. They've been systematically infiltrating American defense contractors through low-bid contracts that executives like Sterling can't resist. The scope of the security breach exceeded even my worst fears about Sterling's reckless cost-cutting. Data Flow Solutions had gained access to intelligence systems at 7 different defense contractors, all owned by InvestCorp Holdings subsidiaries, all featuring executives who'd prioritize cost reduction over security compliance. Agent Rodriguez, are you suggesting this was a coordinated intelligence operation rather than coincidental business decisions? I asked, struggling to process the implications of systematic espionage. Gloria, we believe InvestCorp Holdings was specifically targeted by foreign intelligence services who understood that profit-focused executives would compromise security for cost savings, Agent Rodriguez replied. Sterling wasn't just negligent, he was the perfect unwitting agent for foreign espionage operations. The FBI's financial investigation revealed additional evidence of Sterling's corrupted decision-making process. His compensation package included million-dollar bonuses for achieving specific cost reduction targets, creating personal financial incentives for compromising national security. Sterling received $1.2 million in bonus payments for the Data Flow Solutions contract. Agent Rodriguez showed me the financial records that would become evidence in his criminal trial. He literally profited from endangering American intelligence sources. Sterling's attempts to deflect responsibility onto his subordinates crumbled under FBI scrutiny. Email records showed him personally approving Data Flow Solutions' access to classified systems, despite repeated warnings from security staff about federal law violations. Look at this email chain from last month. Agent Rodriguez highlighted Sterling's written instructions to ignore security protocols. Sterling explicitly ordered his IT director to expedite contractor access regardless of bureaucratic clearance delays. He knew he was violating federal law. The investigation's momentum accelerated as more evidence emerged of Sterling's deliberate violations. Phone recordings captured him instructing subordinates to hide evidence of unauthorized access from Department of Defense auditors who might discover the security breaches. Mr. Sterling, Agent Rodriguez confronted him during a second interview. We have recordings of you ordering employees to delete audit logs and conceal evidence of foreign contractor access. This suggests conscious criminal intent rather than administrative oversight. Sterling's legal defense collapsed as the FBI presented overwhelming evidence of his crimes. Attorney Harrison's strategy shifted from denying violations to negotiating plea agreements that might reduce his client's prison sentence from decades to single-digit years. As news of the federal investigation spread through defense industry publications, Apex Defense Solutions faced complete business collapse. The Department of Defense suspended all contracts pending investigation results, eliminating 80% of the company's revenue overnight. 800 employees are losing their jobs because of Sterling's greed. Sarah called to update me on Apex's deteriorating situation. The company is filing for bankruptcy protection, and investors are fleeing anything connected to Investcorp Holdings. Sterling's cost-cutting triumph had become the most expensive corporate disaster in defense contracting history. His $800,000 savings had created investigation costs exceeding $50 million, legal settlements approaching $100 million, and immeasurable damage to American national security interests. Agent Rodriguez's investigation continued expanding as more victims of Sterling's systematic security violations came forward. The FBI was building a criminal case that would send clear messages to defense industry executives about the consequences of prioritizing profits over protecting America's secrets. The man who'd fired me for being too expensive was about to discover that some costs are paid in federal prison cells rather than corporate bonus checks. While Sterling's world crumbled under federal investigation, I was building my own strategic response to his reckless endangerment of national security. The whistleblower protection laws that Sterling had dismissed as bureaucratic obstacles became my shield for exposing the full scope of his crimes. My first move was filing formal complaints with the Department of Defense Inspector General FBI Counterintelligence Division and congressional oversight committees responsible for defense contractor accountability. Each filing detailed specific violations of federal security laws and provided technical evidence of Sterling's systematic disregard for classified information protection. Gloria, your documentation is the most comprehensive whistleblower complaint we've received regarding defense contractor violations, explained Jennifer Walsh, Deputy Inspector General for Defense Intelligence during our initial meeting. Your technical expertise and detailed records provide exactly the evidence we need for prosecution. The Inspector General's office had been investigating defense contractor security violations for years but lacked inside witnesses with both security clearances and technical knowledge to explain complex cybersecurity breaches to prosecutors and juries. My cooperation with investigative journalists added public pressure to the federal investigation while educating American taxpayers about how corporate greed had compromised their national security. Washington Post reporter Michael Torres had been investigating defense industry corruption and immediately recognized the significance of Sterling's case. Gloria, this story represents everything wrong with privatizing national security functions. Torres explained during our background interview, Sterling's case proves that profit motives and classified information protection are fundamentally incompatible. The resulting expose appeared on the Washington Post front page with the headline, Defense Contractor CEO gave foreign nationals access to top-secret intelligence systems to cut costs. The article provided detailed analysis of how Sterling's violations had potentially compromised ongoing military operations in Afghanistan, Syria, and Eastern Europe. Congressional response was swift and bipartisan. The House Armed Services Committee called emergency hearings on defense contractor security, with my testimony scheduled as the opening statement about systematic failures in industry oversight. Miss Gloria, Committee Chairman Robert Stevens, addressed me during the televised hearing. In your professional opinion, how many American intelligence sources could be compromised by Mr. Sterling's cost-cutting decisions? My answer sent shockwaves through the defense establishment and corporate boardrooms across the country. Congressman Stevens' Project Guardian contains real-time intelligence from approximately 200 human sources operating in hostile countries. Sterling's actions potentially exposed every one of them to torture and execution by enemy governments. The hearing room fell silent as the human consequences of Sterling's corporate greed became clear to congressional representatives and television audiences. This wasn't abstract financial crime. It was betrayal of brave men and women who risked their lives to protect American interests overseas. Sterling's attempts to retaliate against my testimony backfired spectacularly when his attorneys filed frivolous lawsuits claiming I'd violated non-disclosure agreements and committed industrial espionage. Legal experts immediately recognized the harassment nature of his claims and the protection provided by federal whistleblower laws. Sterling's lawsuit against Gloria is legally baseless and professionally desperate, commented Harvard law professor Elizabeth Martinez in her analysis for CNN. Federal whistleblower protection explicitly covers national security disclosures like Gloria's testimony. Sterling is essentially suing someone for preventing further crimes. The Department of Defense's response to my recommendations exceeded my most optimistic expectations for policy reform. Secretary of Defense William Thompson announced comprehensive new security requirements for all defense contractors, directly incorporating technical standards I developed during my years protecting classified systems. Effective immediately, all defense contractors must implement personal executive certification for security compliance decisions, Secretary Thompson announced at a Pentagon press briefing. Senior executives will be personally accountable for violations that compromise classified information. The new regulations, quickly dubbed Gloria's Standards by defense industry publications, required executives like Sterling to undergo security training, pass technical competency examinations, and accept criminal liability for negligent violations of federal security laws. Multiple defense companies began recruiting me as chief security officer, recognizing that my combination of technical expertise, security clearance, and proven integrity made me invaluable in the new regulatory environment. Titan Defense Systems, Apex's largest competitor, offered a position that doubled my former salary while providing equity participation in company growth. Gloria, your reputation for uncompromising security standards is exactly what our clients expect, explained Titan CEO Patricia Rodriguez during our interview meeting. The defense industry needs leaders who understand that protecting national security is more important than maximizing quarterly profits. InvestCorp Holdings faced complete corporate collapse as federal investigations expanded across their defense subsidiary portfolio. The FBI discovered that Sterling's violations were part of systematic cost-cutting strategies that had compromised classified programs at 12 different companies. InvestCorp's stock price has dropped 87% since the investigation began. Financial analyst David Chen reported on CNBC. Investors are fleeing companies involved in national security violations, and credit rating agencies are downgrading InvestCorp's debt to junk status. Sterling's professional isolation became complete as former colleagues and industry associates distanced themselves from association with his crimes. Defense industry executives publicly condemned his actions while implementing new security measures to prevent similar violations at their own companies. Richard Sterling represents the worst impulses of Wall Street culture applied to national security, wrote former Defense Secretary James Mattis in his Wall Street Journal editorial. His case demonstrates why defense contracting requires specialized expertise rather than generic cost-cutting approaches. My technical vindication came through independent security analysis commissioned by the Department of Defense to evaluate the accuracy of my warnings about system vulnerabilities. The analysis confirmed that every concern I'd raised about Sterling's cost-cutting could have prevented the entire security crisis. Gloria's technical assessments were completely accurate, reported Dr. Susan Williams, the cybersecurity expert who led the independent analysis. Her recommendations would have prevented foreign access while maintaining operational effectiveness. Sterling ignored expert advice and created entirely avoidable national security vulnerabilities. The most satisfying revelation came when FBI financial investigators discovered that Sterling's cost-cutting decisions were motivated by personal greed rather than genuine concern for company performance. His compensation contract included specific bonuses for achieving personnel cost reductions, meaning he literally profited from compromising national security. Sterling received $2.3 million in bonus payments for decisions that endangered American intelligence sources. Agent Rodriguez explained during a press briefing that destroyed Sterling's remaining credibility. He prioritized personal wealth over national security interests. As Sterling's legal troubles mounted and his reputation crumbled, I was building a new career dedicated to preventing similar violations through education advocacy and technical excellence. The man who'd fired me for being too expensive had created the platform for my transformation into one of America's most respected voices for cybersecurity integrity. Sterling's cost-cutting victory had become my launching pad for ensuring that corporate greed never again compromised the brave men and women who protect American interests worldwide. 6 months after General Hayes' devastating security audit, federal prosecutors presented their criminal case against Richard Sterling with the kind of overwhelming evidence that defense attorneys describe as unsurvivable. The grand jury indictment contained 18 federal charges that could collectively result in 50 years in federal prison for the former CFO. United States Attorney Lisa Chin held a press conference to announce the charges, emphasizing that Sterling's case represented the Justice Department's commitment to prosecuting executives who endangered national security through corporate negligence. Richard Sterling stands accused of the most serious violations of defense contractor security laws in modern American history, Attorney Chin stated to assembled reporters. His actions potentially compromised intelligence sources whose exposure could result in torture and death at the hands of hostile foreign governments. The charges included multiple counts of espionage under the federal statute that covers unintentional disclosure of national defense information contract fraud for billing the Department of Defense for services he couldn't legally provide, and international traffic in arms regulations violations for sharing defense technology with unauthorized foreign nationals. Sterling's legal defense team, led by expensive white-collar criminal attorney Marcus Williams, attempted to portray their client as a scapegoat for industry-wide problems rather than a criminal who deliberately violated federal laws. Their strategy crumbled under the weight of documented evidence, showing Sterling's conscious decisions to ignore security requirements. Mr. Sterling received explicit warnings about federal law violations from multiple security professionals. Prosecutor Amanda Foster stated during Sterling's arraignment hearing. Email records show him dismissing these concerns as protectionist fear-mongering, while proceeding with cost-cutting decisions he knew violated national security laws. Apex Defense Solutions filed for Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection after losing all government contracts and facing lawsuits from investors who'd suffered massive losses due to Sterling's crimes. 800 employees lost their jobs, their careers destroyed by one executive's greed and ignorance. It's heartbreaking watching colleagues pack up their offices. My former teammate Sarah Thompson called to update me on Apex dissolution. People who dedicated their careers to protecting national security are being punished for Sterling's crimes. The entire defense contracting workforce is suffering because of his reckless decisions. Meanwhile, my new position at Titan Defense Systems provided front-row seats to the industry transformation Sterling's case had triggered. As Chief Information Security Officer, I was implementing security standards that would prevent future executives from endangering classified programs through cost-cutting negligence. Gloria, your security protocols are becoming the industry standard. Titan CEO, Patricia Rodriguez, informed me during our weekly executive briefing. Defense contractors nationwide are adopting your technical requirements to ensure they never face Sterling's legal consequences. The FBI's expanded investigation into InvestCorp Holdings revealed that Sterling's violations were part of systematic security compromises affecting dozens of classified government programs. Parent company executives had created financial incentives for subsidiary managers to reduce security costs without understanding the legal implications of their decisions. InvestCorp's business model essentially incentivized treason, Agent Rodriguez explained during a congressional hearing on defense contractor oversight. They rewarded executives for decisions that compromised national security while claiming ignorance of the consequences. Sterling's personal bankruptcy proceedings provided additional evidence of his corrupted priorities. Court documents revealed that he'd spent bonus money from the Data Flow Solutions contract on luxury purchases, including a $200,000 sports car and a vacation home in the Hamptons. Sterling literally bought toys with money earned by endangering American intelligence sources, Prosecutor Foster highlighted during pretrial hearings. His spending patterns demonstrate complete disregard for the human consequences of his security violations. International implications of Sterling's crimes continued expanding as State Department officials briefed foreign allies about potential intelligence compromises. American diplomats were forced to warn partner governments that shared intelligence might have been exposed to hostile foreign services. Sterling's actions have damaged America's intelligence relationships worldwide, testified Deputy Secretary of State Karen Wilson during congressional oversight hearings. Allied intelligence services are questioning whether they can trust American contractors with sensitive information that protects their own national security interests. The most damaging evidence against Sterling came from recorded phone calls, where he explicitly instructed subordinates to conceal security violations from Department of Defense auditors. Federal wiretaps captured him describing audit preparations as managing the bureaucrats, while maintaining unauthorized foreign access to classified systems. Sterling knew he was violating federal law and actively worked to hide his crimes from government oversight. Agent Rodriguez testified before the grand jury that voted to indict him. These recordings prove criminal intent rather than negligent mistakes. Sterling's attempts to claim ignorance of security requirements were demolished by evidence showing he'd received mandatory training on defense contractor obligations, signed personal certifications, acknowledging his legal responsibilities, and been repeatedly warned about specific violations by security professionals. Mr. Sterling attended 3 separate training sessions on international traffic and arms regulations. Prosecutor Foster demonstrated during pretrial motions. He personally signed documents acknowledging that violations could result in criminal prosecution. His claims of ignorance are contradicted by his own signatures. Victim impact statements from military personnel whose safety had been endangered by Sterling's actions provided emotional weight to the technical evidence of his crimes. Special operations soldiers testified about how intelligence compromises could expose their identities to terrorist organizations seeking revenge. Sterling's cost-cutting decisions potentially signed death warrants for American service members operating in hostile territory, testified Army Colonel Michael Davis, whose unit relied on Project Guardian intelligence for mission planning. His corporate greed endangered every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine who depends on classified intelligence for survival. As Sterling's criminal trial approached, his legal team made increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate plea agreements that would reduce his potential prison sentence. The Justice Department rejected all proposals that didn't include substantial prison time and full restitution for investigation costs. Sterling's crimes were too serious and his violations too systematic for lenient treatment. Attorney Chen explained to reporters covering the case, "The Justice Department must send clear messages that corporate executives cannot endanger national security for personal financial gain. The man who'd fired me to save $800,000 was facing criminal penalties that would cost him decades of freedom, millions of dollars in legal fees, and complete destruction of his professional reputation." Sterling's cost-cutting triumph had become the most expensive mistake of his life, with consequences extending far beyond any corporate bonus he'd earned. Federal prosecutors were prepared to prove that Richard Sterling's greed had transformed him from corporate executive into unwitting agent of foreign intelligence services, making him a traitor to the country whose secrets he'd sworn to protect. Sterling's federal trial began on a crisp October morning in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, the jurisdiction known as the Rocket Docket, for its swift handling of national security cases. Judge Patricia Morrison, a former federal prosecutor with extensive experience in espionage trials, presided over proceedings that would determine whether Sterling's crimes warranted decades in federal prison. The courtroom was packed with reporters, defense industry executives, and government officials who understood that Sterling's case would establish precedents for holding corporate leaders accountable for national security violations. Outside protesters carried signs reading, "Corporate greed endangers troops," and "Prison for traitors," reflecting public anger about Sterling's betrayal of American intelligence sources. Prosecutor Amanda Foster opened the government's case with devastating precision, methodically explaining how Sterling's cost-cutting decisions had created vulnerabilities that hostile foreign governments could exploit to identify and murder American intelligence assets. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Foster addressed the 12 citizens who would decide Sterling's fate. The defendant, Richard Sterling, sold access to America's most sensitive secrets for $800,000 in cost savings and personal bonus payments. His greed potentially signed death warrants for brave men and women who risked their lives to protect our national security. Foster's opening statement established the human stakes of Sterling's corporate crimes while providing technical context that non-expert jurors could understand. Project Guardian wasn't abstract data. It was real-time intelligence that protected American soldiers, diplomats, and intelligence officers operating in hostile countries worldwide. Sterling's defense attorney, Marcus Williams, attempted to portray his client as a scapegoat for industry-wide problems rather than a criminal who deliberately violated federal laws. Williams argued that Sterling had been poorly advised by subordinates who failed to explain the legal complexities of defense contractor security requirements. Mr. Sterling was a financial expert trying to modernize outdated business practices in an industry resistant to change, Williams told the jury during his opening statement. He relied on technical specialists to ensure legal compliance while focusing on his area of expertise improving operational efficiency. Williams's defense strategy crumbled immediately when Foster presented evidence of Sterling's conscious decisions to ignore expert warnings about federal law violations. Email records showed Sterling dismissing security concerns from multiple professionals while proceeding with cost-cutting decisions he knew endangered classified programs. My testimony as the government's lead witness provided technical expertise that transformed complex cybersecurity concepts into compelling evidence of Sterling's crimes. Judge Morrison had ruled that my status as a protected whistleblower prevented defense attempts to discredit my motivations for cooperating with prosecutors. Ms. Gloria, Prosecutor Foster asked, during direct examination, in your expert opinion, what were the potential consequences of Mr. Sterling's decision to grant foreign nationals access to Project Guardian's classified intelligence systems? My answer provided the jury with clear understanding of Sterling's betrayal. The Project Guardian system contained real-time intelligence from approximately 200 human sources operating in countries like Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, and North Korea. Sterling's actions potentially exposed every one of these sources to identification, torture, and execution by hostile governments. The courtroom fell silent as the human consequences of Sterling's corporate decisions became clear. This wasn't white-collar crime affecting only financial interests. It was potential mass murder of American intelligence assets whose courage protected national security. Sterling's arrogance during cross-examination sealed his conviction when he dismissed security concerns as bureaucratic obstacles to modernization, while claiming that efficient business practices justified his violations of federal law. Mr. Sterling, Defense Attorney Williams asked, during his client's testimony, did you intend to harm American national security through your cost reduction initiatives? Sterling's response revealed the narcissistic worldview that had enabled his crimes. I intended to modernize an inefficient industry that was wasting taxpayer money on unnecessary security theater. My decisions improved operational effectiveness while reducing costs for American taxpayers. Prosecutor Foster's cross-examination destroyed Sterling's claims of patriotic motivation by highlighting the personal financial benefits he'd received from compromising national security. Mr. Sterling, you received $2.3 million in bonus payments for the cost reductions that included granting foreign nationals access to classified systems, Foster stated with prosecutorial precision. Were American taxpayers supposed to benefit from your personal enrichment through national security violations? Sterling's attempts to justify his bonus payments while claiming patriotic motivations exposed the greed underlying his criminal decisions. Jury members visibly recoiled when Foster presented evidence of Sterling's luxury purchases made with money earned by endangering American intelligence sources. Expert witnesses testified about the sophisticated nature of foreign intelligence operations that exploited vulnerabilities created by executives like Sterling. CIA counterintelligence analyst Dr. Jennifer Martinez explained how hostile governments specifically targeted profit-focused American contractors. Foreign intelligence services understand that corporate executives, motivated by cost reduction, can be manipulated into compromising security without realizing they're enabling espionage operations. Dr. Martinez testified, Mr. Sterling's decisions followed patterns we've observed in successful foreign intelligence penetrations of American defense contractors. The prosecution's most damaging evidence came from recorded phone calls, where Sterling explicitly instructed subordinates to conceal security violations from Department of Defense auditors who might discover his crimes. Sterling's own voice proves criminal intent, Prosecutor Foster explained to jurors during closing arguments. These recordings show him actively working to hide federal law violations while maintaining unauthorized foreign access to classified intelligence systems. Defense attorney Williams's closing argument attempted to generate sympathy for Sterling by portraying him as a victim of a complex legal system that criminalized normal business practices. The strategy failed when jurors remembered Sterling's luxury spending and dismissive attitude toward national security concerns. Richard Sterling chose personal enrichment over protecting American intelligence sources. Foster concluded her closing statement. His greed potentially endangered every brave man and woman who risked their life to gather intelligence that keeps our country safe. The federal jury deliberated for only 4 hours before reaching unanimous verdicts on 16 of 18 charges against Sterling. The swift conviction reflected jurors' outrage at Sterling's betrayal of national security interests for personal financial gain. Judge Morrison's sentencing hearing provided additional opportunities for Sterling's victims to describe the personal consequences of his crimes. Military personnel, whose operations had been compromised by intelligence exposure, testified about increased danger to American forces operating overseas. Mr. Sterling's cost-cutting decisions forced my unit to abort 3 critical missions because our intelligence sources had been potentially compromised, testified Marine Colonel Patricia Williams. His corporate greed directly endangered Marines whose safety depended on maintaining the secrecy of our intelligence assets. Judge Morrison's sentencing speech reflected the seriousness of Sterling's betrayal while establishing precedent for future cases involving corporate executives who endangered national security. Mr. Sterling, you held a position of trust that required protecting America's most sensitive secrets. Judge Morrison addressed the convicted defendant. You violated that trust for personal financial gain, potentially endangering the brave men and women who serve our country overseas. Sterling's sentence of 22 years in federal prison represented one of the longest terms ever imposed for defense contractor violations, sending clear messages to corporate executives about the consequences of prioritizing profits over national security. As Sterling was led away in handcuffs to begin his prison sentence, I felt profound satisfaction that justice had been served for every intelligence professional whose life he'd endangered through his greed. The man who'd fired me for being too expensive had learned that some costs are paid in federal prison cells rather than corporate bonus payments. Sterling's conviction marked the end of his criminal career and the beginning of his transformation into a cautionary tale about corporate executives who mistake profit maximization for patriotic service. 2 years after Sterling's conviction and imprisonment, I stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee as they prepared to vote on landmark legislation that would transform defense contractor accountability forever. The committee room was filled with military leaders, industry executives, and advocacy groups who had worked together to ensure that Sterling's crimes could never be repeated. Senator Williams, I addressed the committee chairman, the legislation you're considering today represents the most important defense contractor reform in American history. These new standards will protect both national security interests and the brave professionals who dedicate their careers to serving our country. The Senate was preparing to pass the Defense Contractor Accountability Act, comprehensive legislation that required personal executive certification for all security compliance decisions, mandatory prison sentences for national security violations, and whistleblower protections that encourage reporting of potential crimes. Sterling himself was serving his 22-year sentence at Federal Correctional Institution Englewood in Colorado, a medium security prison where white-collar criminals learned that betraying American national security carried consequences more severe than financial penalties. Prison officials reported that he spent most of his time in the library, apparently trying to understand the laws he'd violated through ignorance and greed. Sterling has been a model prisoner. Warden Patricia Davis informed me when I inquired about his status for an article I was writing about corporate accountability. He seems to finally comprehend the seriousness of his crimes and the lives he endangered through his cost-cutting decisions. My career had flourished beyond anything I could have imagined when Sterling fired me for being too expensive. Titan Defense Systems had promoted me to Chief Security Officer for the entire corporation overseeing cybersecurity for $12 billion in government contracts across 3 continents. Gloria, your security standards have become the industry benchmark, Titan CEO Patricia Rodriguez informed me during our quarterly review meeting. Defense contractors worldwide are implementing your protocols to ensure they never face Sterling's legal consequences. The recognition I'd received for exposing Sterling's crimes extended far beyond corporate promotions. Congress had awarded me the Congressional Medal for Distinguished Public Service, the highest honor available to civilian employees who protect national security interests. Ms. Gloria's courage in reporting security violations saved countless American lives, Senator Robert Stevens had stated during the award ceremony. Her dedication to protecting classified information exemplifies the patriotic service we expect from everyone who handles our nation's secrets. But the most meaningful recognition came from the military personnel whose lives had been protected by my decision to expose Sterling's crimes. Special Operations Unit's intelligence officers and diplomatic security teams had all sent messages thanking me for preventing the compromise of sources and methods that kept them safe overseas. Your whistleblowing prevented the exposure of intelligence assets who support our missions in hostile territory, wrote Army Colonel Michael Torres in a letter that brought tears to my eyes. Every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine who depends on classified intelligence owes you a debt of gratitude. The educational impact of Sterling's case had transformed how business schools and security training programs taught corporate responsibility. His conviction became required curriculum for executives seeking defense contractor positions, ensuring that future leaders understood the personal consequences of compromising national security. Sterling's case is the perfect example of how corporate greed can transform executives into unwitting agents of foreign espionage, explained Harvard Business School professor Dr. Jennifer Walsh during her ethics seminar. His story teaches students that fiduciary responsibility includes protecting national security interests, not just maximizing shareholder profits. Apex Defense Solutions had been completely liquidated during Sterling's bankruptcy proceedings. Its valuable assets acquired by Titan Defense Systems under my supervision. I'd taken particular satisfaction in ensuring that Sterling's former employees received fair treatment and recognition for their contributions to national security. Bringing the Apex team into Titan's family was one of our best decisions, Patricia Rodriguez observed as we reviewed integration results. Their expertise and dedication to security excellence perfectly complement our corporate culture. The speaking engagements that followed my congressional testimony had evolved into a second career focused on corporate responsibility and cybersecurity ethics. Universities' professional conferences and government training programs regularly invited me to share lessons learned from Sterling's case. Corporate executives must understand that national security isn't negotiable. I explained to Stanford Business School's graduating class during their commencement ceremony. The privilege of handling classified information comes with personal responsibility that extends beyond quarterly earnings reports. Sterling's downfall had triggered systematic reforms across the entire defense contracting industry. InvestCorp Holdings had been dissolved under federal investigation, its subsidiaries sold to companies committed to maintaining proper security standards rather than maximizing cost reductions. The Sterling case fundamentally changed how we evaluate defense contractor compliance, explained Department of Defense Inspector General Patricia Martinez during a conference on contractor oversight. Executives now face personal criminal liability for security violations, which has dramatically improved industry compliance rates. My personal life had also flourished alongside professional success. I was engaged to Dr. James Peterson, a cybersecurity researcher who shared my commitment to protecting national security through technical excellence. James had proposed during a quiet dinner overlooking the Potomac River, presenting a ring while acknowledging that my work protecting classified information would always come first. Watching you fight for what's right inspired me to dedicate my own research to cybersecurity applications that protect military personnel, James had said during his proposal. I want to spend my life supporting someone whose courage makes America safer. The foundation I'd established using settlement money from Sterling's criminal restitution had become a leading resource for defense industry professionals facing ethical dilemmas about security compliance. The Sterling Foundation provided legal resources, technical training, and advocacy support for employees who discover potential violations. Gloria's foundation has become the gold standard for supporting cybersecurity professionals who face pressure to compromise security standards, noted Dr. Patricia Williams, director of the National Cybersecurity Institute. Her work ensures that future Sterlings will be stopped before they can endanger national security. As I concluded my reflection on the journey from Sterling's victim to America's advocate for defense contractor accountability, my secure phone buzzed with a message from a young cybersecurity analyst at a defense contractor in Seattle. Her message read, "Ms. Gloria, I'm facing pressure from executives to reduce security costs in ways that might violate federal requirements. Could you provide guidance on how to protect both my career and national security interests?" I smiled, remembering the isolation and fear I'd felt when Sterling fired me for opposing his reckless cost-cutting. This young professional wouldn't face her ethical challenges alone because Sterling's crimes had created support systems that would outlast his prison sentence by decades. I began typing my response, starting with words that had become my signature advice. "Let me tell you about the time my CFO fired me for being too expensive, not knowing a DoD general was coming the next day." Sometimes the most dangerous threats to national security come from executives who mistake cost-cutting for leadership, but courage and integrity always triumph over corporate greed. The story that began with Sterling's arrogance and ignorance had become a testament to the power of standing up for national security principles, even when victory seemed impossible. Sterling had learned that some decisions carry consequences measured in decades rather than quarters, and that protecting American secrets is worth more than any corporate bonus. Richard Sterling's downfall proved that justice finds everyone, eventually, especially when patriots refuse to stay silent about crimes that endanger the brave men and women who protect our freedom worldwide. Have you ever witnessed workplace situations where cutting corners could endanger others, whether in your job community or personal life? Sometimes standing up for what's right feels impossible, but history shows us that one person's courage can prevent disasters and save lives. Share your thoughts in the comments about times when you had to choose between convenience and doing the right thing. If this story inspired you to think about corporate responsibility and protecting others through ethical decisions, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about people who chose integrity over profit. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that whistleblowers are heroes, not traitors, and that defending what's right is always worth the personal cost. Thank you for joining me on this journey from corporate victim to national security advocate. Remember that your voice matters when you see wrongdoing. Your integrity is worth more than any paycheck, and your courage to speak truth to power can protect people you'll never meet. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and sometimes that vigilance requires ordinary citizens to do extraordinary things. Until next time, keep defending what's right, keep protecting those who serve, and keep believing that justice always wins when good people refuse to stay silent about crimes against our country and our values.